Well, welcome to the recording for week 6 in Visual Basic, and you can see that week 6 is September 15 through 19. So if I bring that down, you can see that we're moving into the Array List Collection Stacks and Queues unit, or ACSQ unit. And of course the work for this week, the week 6, the Class Connect write-up that you always do. Then we have a collections quiz, array list quiz, stacks and queues quiz, hash table quiz. Now the work for the week. Here's an optional assignment. This is some practice code work. Now I know some of you like programming. You're welcome to do the code work to get credit on that. For the rest of you, I will end up giving an alternative assignment. I'll have that posted probably by tomorrow. Same thing with down here, there's a sample program assignment. Those that like to do programming, you can go ahead and do that programming assignment. Those that don't really like to do programming, I'll give you an optional assignment. So nobody's going to miss any points on this work. The optional assignment will that will take place of these two will count the same number of points. Now the work that everybody will do this week, there's a database research assignment that in section D that you all will do. And then of course finally you have the unit exam at the end, and then that's all for this week. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into the Class Connect write-up. And actually before I do that, a couple of things, and I've mentioned this before, I'm not very thrilled with the way that this course is lined out. I don't think they give enough preparation in the beginning on how to do effective programming or how to even use Visual Basic. So I'm going to restructure some items in here that require you to do programming within Visual Basic, and those are the ones that I'm going to give an alternative work on. Those that want to do the programs, you're more than welcome to do the programs. And I'll come up with more of a summary today and get that posted in the class. But for now, don't worry about doing the programs if you haven't done the programs yet. And I mean the ones done with Visual Basic. Early on, you had a couple of programs that you were going to do, like in a word processing program, in a text program. You do need to do those, because those were fairly simple on how to do the language and such. So be on the lookout for the alternative work that I'll set up, the options instead of the programming. All right. Now we are in week 6, so we only have we have week 6, 7, 8, and 9. So we just have 4 weeks left of this class. It finishes up on October 11th. So if you're behind, you need to get caught up, get some of the works in. And particularly from last week, we had the finishing plan. Real easy. Probably take you about 10 minutes to do that. Real easy, 25 or 20 points, whatever it was. So get that done. Make sure you get the write-ups done. All right. Array list, collection, stacks, and queues. Now what this all talks about, these are all methods of storing information that can be used later on. Like, it's considered database work. That's what a lot of programming is database. You would have lists of information, and then you use commands to access particular parts of the information. So that's what collections, array lists, stacks, and queues, that's what that's all about. So let's go to the write-up question, so I can address the questions. So in section A, in programming, what is a collection? Describe the 3 ways collections can be categorized. How do you retrieve data in a collection? So we'll get to section A shortly. But in previous units, we learned about data types, variables, and such. So we also wrote some sample programs. Now we're going to learn about these array lists, which is knowing about this, you can do some better programming and understand programs more. So in this whole unit, on the ACSQ unit, we're going to learn about what a collection is, collection classes and interfaces, learn what arrays and types of arrays are, learn what an array list is, describe stacks and queues, and look at various search methods. Now the points for the class, of course, some of these things we're not going to be doing, so always go to the grade book to find how many points. Like the exam is not worth this many points because I changed some of the questions in there. So make sure you go to the grade book to find out how much things are worth. Okay, again, Class Connect write-up, just to remind myself, need to make sure we answer those questions. Okay, Section A. So in programming, and we used earlier, like in the last unit, it talked about a keyword called namespace, which is where you define a collection of classes or a bunch of classes. But now we're going to use what's called collections. And some of the things we're going to look at are lists, arrays, queues, and stacks as we start learning about collections. So in this section about collections, we're going to understand the collections, the namespace or the keyword collections, look at collection types, and explain interfaces used in collections. Now, a collection is a group of objects or data that share the same characteristics. For instance, students at Insight schools. That would be a collection because the same characteristic you share are that you are all students. So I could put you all in a database, and you are in a database, and I could search for information on each of you by going through that database. So it's things that have same characteristics. If you do a Google search on the word skateboard, you would come up with a collection of hits that are all related to skateboards, probably. So that would be a collection. So that's how databases are used. So this starts talking about, like, if you have a set of cutlery, like knives and forks and things like that, then there are different groups of objects. So some of the groups might be the spoons, the forks, but then there's different kinds of spoons, different kinds of forks, right? So collections are things that have same characteristics. So in programming, a collection is a group of objects, and you can do functions on those objects in order to get out of that list, out of that collection, certain pieces of information that you want about some of the objects. And as you work with collections, for those of you that want to really get into the programming, you're going to learn things about the system.collections, the name, that keyword that you would use. You're going to learn about interfaces. And you're going to learn about different types of classes and variety of objects. Now, there are 4 different ways that collections are categorized and are used. There's array list, hash table, queue, and stack. We'll look at those in a little bit. Now, we're still talking about collections in general. So here's a little quiz on collections. Now, the collection interface. There are different interfaces that you have to use when you use collections. And again, those of you that do the optional work to do the programming, you'll learn more about the iCollect, the iList, and the iDictionary, and what these certain commands do within the iNet framework. So different classifications of collections, and this is a Class Connect write-up, the answer to that. So when you have a collection, which is a group of similar objects, right, or things that have commonalities or similarities or something in common, there's an ordered collection. That's a collection that's stored in a specific order. Or an index collection, they are indexed or stored by numeric index. So like all of you students in the Insight database, you're an indexed collection because you are all have a numeric student code, right? And it might even be a keyed collection because all of you have a unique key value. And actually, I think it's more the index collection where you have a particular number value. The key value is slightly different. So those are the 3 ways that collections are categorized. And that's an answer to the Class Connect write-up question. So different types of collections. So here's an ordered collection. So for instance, if you have a bunch of books on a shelf, so here are a bunch of books, that's an ordered collection, because the data is not in any specific order. Or it can be in a specific order. So it can be random, like a stack like this, or it can be in order like a library. And to retrieve the necessary data, you have to work your way through the collection to where the data sits, right? So if I wanted to get this book, or if I wanted to get, maybe I had all these books stacked up and I wanted to find the math book, I would start from the top one, remove it, Okay, it's not the math book, remove it. Look at the second one, it's not the math book, remove it. Look at the third one, it's not the math book, remove it. Fourth one's math book, then I grab it. So I'd have to go through the whole collection in order to find what I want. So that's one way that you can retrieve information. Now there's also indexed collection. So an index collection is one that is in a particular order. So this talks about like if you have students in a classroom and you put them by first name. And then of course if you have students who have the same first name, then you'd have to go to the last name, right? So then you could also use student ID numbers. So that's how most things are done to identify people, is to use ID numbers. Like we all have social security numbers, right? Those are identifying numbers. So that's an index collection of people all around the United States, is a full list of social security numbers. Or all the students in Insight schools, you'll have your own numbers, so that's an index collection of students from your student ID. Now the overview about the keyed collection. Now keyed collection is a collection of things that have numbers attached to them. Now this is different from the student identification numbers, because those identification numbers are specific to you as a student. In a keyed collection, like let's say all this stuff, there's 4 notebooks and a pen that was in this bag. So the pen would be item number 1, this notebook would be item number 2, this notebook item 3, this notebook item 4, this notebook item 5. So they would all be given their own key or number. That number doesn't really mean anything, because somebody else can make up this list and they can make this notebook number 1, this number 2, this number 3, and this number 4, and the pen number 5. So that's different than the number that we just talked about a minute ago, like the index numbers that we all have. So here's a little activity to see what you know about collections. And of course the quiz. So the collections quiz is right here, and I have all the quiz previews posted in one document here. So there are all the quiz previews. And then you're going to obviously do the collections quiz. So that was section A. So let's go back to the write-up, see if I answered the questions. In a program, what is a collection? Describe 3 ways collections can be categorized. How do you retrieve data in an ordered collection? Well, this is an ordered collection, right? And how do you retrieve data from an ordered collection? You start from the beginning and you work your way down until you find the item you want. So that's how you retrieve data in an ordered collection. Work your way through the collection until you find the item you want. All right, section B. Now section B, we're going to start talking about arrays and array lists. So let's go to the write-up. And how are an array and an array list different in programming? Is the first item in an array list number 0 or 1? What keyword do you use to put items in an array list? So section B. So now we talk about arrays and array lists. So we're going to look at the array lists, and after you learn about this material, you'll be able to use array lists to store and retrieve information. For those of you that really get into the programming part of this, you'll use array lists quite a bit. But if we look at this array list, pretend these are 9 students in a class. The first item is always numbered 0. So this goes from 0 to 9, so it has 10 items. Now in this unit, there's a section we're going to understand what an array list is and what it does. Create an array list, store and retrieve items from an array list, implement an array list in a program. So first of all, we're going to learn about an array. So if you have a bunch of items you want to store in a program, you use an array. If you don't, you use an array list. Now they're not interchangeable, they're different things. So if you know the number of items, you're going to use an array. If you don't know how many items you're going to have, you'll use an array list, because an array lets you add more items to it. Or an array, once you set that up, it's limited. If I have 10 items, then I'm going to have a 10 set array. But an array list, I would create that if I don't know how many items I'm going to have. So that's how an array list and an array are different from one another. Now this audio, I hit the play button and it wasn't playing earlier, but it's just going to talk about all of this and what an array, how an array works. So if we looked at this, here's an array. This has 13 items. Of course, the first item always starts at 0. So an array is used again if you know how many items you have. You'd set up an array. Now this is single dimensional, meaning that it just has one key that it focuses on. But you can also have multi-dimensional, where it could hold lots of different items. So that's what an array is. Now an array list. Now an array list also holds items, but again, an array list is different because the length of an array list does not need to be set when it's created. You can continually add things to an array list. So I would say the database that has all the students from Insight in it, that's an array list because we don't know how many students we're going to have. We add and subtract students all the time, right? Now there are some other different things, like an array can be used only with one type of data, and an array list can be a different type of data. But the main reason is, the main difference between an array and an array list is that an array has a set number of items when you create it. So different properties in an array list. So there's the capacity, which means the maximum number of items that it can hold. The count is the actual numbers that are in it. The fixed size, so whether the array list can be fixed. You can make an array list that is a fixed length, or one that's dynamic that can change. Then item, of course, is what the value is that goes into the array list. So here's a little quiz, see if you remember those items. Now let's go back to the Class Connect write-up. Make sure we're answering these questions. Arrays and array lists different. We already did that. The first item in an array list, number 0 or 1. Well, I talked about that already, didn't I? What keyword do you use to put an item in an array list? Well, if you look at this, here are some of the keywords that you use with the array lists. And the add is used to add a value to an array list. So add is the term used to add value in an array list. And you see all the different things. So insert would be to place something in an array list in a particular place. Remove is to take something out of an array list. Remove add is to take something out of a specific location in an array list. You can see all the different keywords that are used with array lists. So here's a little quiz, see if you can do very well on that. Now working with the array list, the first thing you need to do, just like everything within Visual Basic, is you need to declare it. So you would declare fruit. So this is going to be, we can see this is going to be an array list of fruit, types of fruit, and the collection. So it's going to be an array list that you're going to create. And then to add to it, so what this says is add the fruit apple to my list called fruits, to my array list called fruits. So we're building this array list, and you can look at the same list, and you also end up creating an index. So what this means is that apple will have the index number 0, orange will have the index number 1, etc. as you create that array list. And you see that when you go to access the items in the array list, you can access it either by the name or you can access it by the index number that you gave it. And then count, you can always count. So what this does, this command will give you the count of how many items are in this array list called fruits. Here's a little quiz for you, see how you can do on that. Some code practice activities. So look at the following code, answer the questions below down here. Let's go ahead and give it a try, see what you can answer. But you can see what they've done here is they've declared an array list called subjects. And they've added, like these would be like your, if you're really into programming, these would add your programming courses into your subjects list. So you're adding C programming, C#.NET program, you're adding Visual Basic, and then here you're removing the item that's at number 2. Well, which item's here at number 2? Do you remember how things are numbered? Then you would add VBNet. So that explains how this program works. So what you can do now is go down here and see if you can answer these things. Answer those questions. And here's another program. Look at the following program. What is its purpose? Well, this program lists items that are on a table. So it creates something called objects in my table or objects on my table, and it's going to be a new array list. So there's a computer on their table that was added to this list, books added to the list, a watch added to the list, an iPod added to the list, and pen added to the list. So then items in my table are. So console write line, of course, that would go ahead and it would write all 5 of these items on the screen. And then it says remove iPod. So then the computer goes back and it takes out this iPod item. And then it goes down here and it writes it again, writes that list again, so it would write that list without iPod in there. So you can answer these questions about it. Here are a few notes about the program. So it prints the list of all the items, and then when it removes iPod, then it prints the list a second time. Now if you're going to do programming, you can enter similar programming, use items from your backpack or a table in your own room. So if you want to do the programming on this, that's fine. So yours is going to be very similar to this. And I think, what is it else they have you do? So save your program and submit a screenshot. So you would create this program, you would save it, so compile it, execute it, do a screen capture of it, and you would send me the VB program as well as the screenshot of the results when it printed out on your console screen. Now again, that's optional for those that want to do programming. If you don't want to do the programming part, I will create an assignment that will give you the points for this. And then the array list quiz, of course, where is that? There's the array list quiz, and the quiz previews right up above here. All right, now we're into section C. Before we jump into section C, of course, we want to look at the write-up. So I answered all these questions in section B. Okay, section C, what does the pop command do on a stack? How are stacks and queues different in how they process information? So section C. So now we're going to look at stacks and queues. And stacks and queues are other ways to store information. Now one thing, stack is organized in short-term memory, and sometimes you might be doing work on a computer and you might see something that says stack overload. That means that the stack is not big enough for the information you're trying to get. Now the thing about stacks, this is really important. Now a stack, this would be just like, imagine a stack of books like we used before on your desk. Now if you wanted to remove items from that stack, you would start at the top. So if I have a stack of books, so I have book number 1 I put on the table, then book number 2 I put on top of book number 1, then book number 3 I put on top of book number 2. So I'm building this stack of 10 books. Now if I want to remove things from that stack, I have to take the last one, meaning the one at the top, it comes off first. So stacks always work. The last one in the stack is the first one that's out. So the last one is the first one that's out. So that's the one way that things are retrieved. Now queues are different. So we're going to look at defining use stack, queues, and look at using stacks and queues. So I already talked about a stack. So a stack, things are only added or taken from the top. Now push adds an item to the top. Pop removes an item from the top of the stack. So you can see here, to push, that would be to add item to the top. So that's how a stack works. It automatically goes on the top of the other items that were in the stack. And then pop would be to remove. So we have this list of items over here, and pop, then it always removes the stuff from the top. So again, the last one that was put on is the first one that's taken off. That's how stack works. Now a queue is different. A queue is that things are inserted at one end and deleted from the other end. Now think of a queue as a printing queue. For instance, here in my house, my son, my wife, and I all have access to a wireless printer. If I send a job to the printer and then my son sends a job and my wife sends a job, which one is done first? Well, mine is. So in that case, in printing queues, the first one in is the first one out. So that's how a printer works. I think you can see how queuing is different from stacking. Another example of queuing would be actually in England and Britain, they use the word queue for a line. Like if you're standing in line to get Chinese food at the Chinese restaurant, you're in a queue. Well, if you're standing in line, you're the first one in line, so you're going to be the first one out. That's how a queue works. That's how a line works, right? So that's how a queue and a stack are different. Stack is last in, first out. Queue is first in, first out. Now here's more on stacks and queues, so you can either listen to this or you can look at a copy of this strip. But this will tell you how to declare stacks, how to declare queues. So go through that, and those of you that are going to do the programming for this will be really useful for you. Little activity, see what you remember about stacks and queues. Then of course the stacks and queues quiz right over here and the quiz preview right up above. Let's go to the write-up, see if we answered the questions on stacks and queues. We did. Okay. Now section D, what is a hash table? How would a programmer use a hash table? So section D. So now we're getting into hash tables. And hash tables are where they match up keys or items in the list with index numbers. That's what a hash table is. So a hash table stores and retrieves information that uses a key. So we're going to understand hash tables, define them, store and retrieve items in a hash table, understand how a hash table is used. So again, a hash table is a method to store information with items attached to a key or associated with a key. So if we look at this, like John Smith in this list, he's items 873, and this is John Smith's information. So if I wanted to find John Smith's information, I would just type in 873 and it would pull up all of John Smith's information, or I could even just type in John Smith, right? So Lisa Smith, she's item number 1. John Smith is a heck of a long list, right? Is item 873. So those are the key, the unique identifiers for John Smith is number 873. And in a hash table, the computer matches the name of the key and then retrieves the data. So it matches the number that you give to the key. Now why hashing? The thing that hashing does, hash table makes finding records much faster than the other ways. So if you remember the other ways where it had to search, like searching for the books in a stack, you take the top one off, take the next one off, the next one off. What if you had 873 books in a stack? It would take you forever to find it. Well, in hashing, what it does is you have, a certain book would be a certain number, and you just type in that number, then it would go grab that book for you or find that book for you. So that's where hashing is much faster than a linear search, and linear is going one by one, or a binary search. What binary search does is it searches two things, compares them, and if they're not right, then it searches another two things until it actually gets down to what is the correct thing that it's looking for. So binary, talks about binary down here, binary is faster than a linear search, but not nearly as fast as a hash table search. Now here's information about binary and hash table, and I'd recommend that you go through, you could look at this, but I'd recommend that you go through and you read it or listen to it. Like binary, what it does is it would go to the center. So let's say you have well, in this case, you have 120 items, and you want to find item 80. Well, in a binary search, it would go to item 60, and it would say, well, is item 80 below or above 60? Well, then it would say it's greater. So then it eliminates groups of numbers, groups of values until it gets to your answer. So listen to this presentation. That will explain quite a bit about how those comparing different items. Here's a hashing tutorial. So you can read the script, but this talks just more about the commands you use with hashing and how the syntax works, how to do certain commands. So again, those of you that are going to choose to do the programming in this class and really enjoy programming, you want to go through that tutorial. Okay, sample program. What's the difference in this program and the one we saw in the last section that was similar? This code has each of the items labeled with an item number. So if we look at this, this was objects on a person's table. So computer is item 1, book is item 2, watch is item 3, etc. So the thing about this is I could easily go through and index these things and just find the item numbers. And we've looked at some of these answers before, and here's the explanation of this. So you can very easily remove items from particular locations in this program. Now again, this is an optional program. So what they're going to have you do is adjust the program from the last section for the hash table and then make it similar to this. So you're going to adjust your program from the last one. You're going to send a screenshot of the results of the program and send me your program. Now again, this is only for the people who want to do the programming. The rest of you, if you don't want to do the programming, I'm going to give you an optional assignment. Hash table practice, so go ahead and do that activity. Now everybody's going to do this database research assignment. Now there are all kinds of databases, and you use databases all the time even though you might not know it. So here are two huge databases, online databases. So visit them, read about the databases. Write a short summary about the database, including the type of records it has, what the database is used for, and how many records are in it. Find 3 more sites that use online databases and do the same thing for those 3 sites. You're going to send me 5 sites. 2 are included here. Send me the name of the database site as well as the web address of the database. Then answer these questions for each of them. So clearly mark it. Don't make one big long paragraph. So you should have like 5 sections to this, 1 section for each of the 5 databases that you found. Then submit it. I would just submit this as ACSQ unit, database research. Then you know exactly what that work is. Okay, finally, the hash table quiz right over here on the left, and the quiz preview is up above. And lastly, you have the unit exam preview right here, and unit exam. So that's the work for this week. Again, this program is optional, and I'll come up with another assignment for those who choose not to do the programming, and this program is optional. But feel free to do those if you want to. I know some of you really like doing programming, so feel free to do those if you want. That's all I have for you. Thanks for listening. I look forward to work, everybody. Bye.